Boson on 1FM 91.3, 1 in a million. Time right now, 9:13. It is the morning drive with the Flying Dutchman and Carrie Chong. And today in the studio, very happy to have with us Dr. Glenn Graves. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, Dr. Glenn Graves is a psychologist. He's also founder and director of Counselling Perspective. That's what the company is called, right?
Yes,
The practice. So maybe tell us a bit more about Counselling Perspective. How big is the team? How long have you guys been around?
Well, we have about 30 people working for us, including counselors, coaches, wellness staff, and including neurofeedback team as well.
I want to talk about neurofeedback. Well, we'll do that later in the show.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been in Singapore over 20 years. And
Wow.
Been in private practice that long. Yeah.
Well, that's a
Wow.
long time.
Yeah. Let's be honest. Marriage is tough. It is, right? But we want to, hear from you. In your years of experience, you've seen many couples. What does a healthy relationship or a marriage look like in your view? What are some of the key components, like the pillars?
The pillars of it, yeah.
Okay, well, let me start by saying that question is framed correctly. Healthy is the key word.
Yeah.
So healthy boundaries would be at the heart of every relationship,
Okay.
whether it's colleague to colleague or parent to child or romantic relationship.
Right,
of
right,
course.
right.
So what that means is a person knows what their threshold is, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And more importantly, they're able to stick to it, be firm with it, and express it. If they don't hold to it, then the boundary's loose, and many things can happen when we have loose boundaries in a relationship.
Right. So are there patterns that certain couples stick to that enhance that longevity?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I obviously wouldn't see too many people if they're doing well, right?
That's true.
So they'll come in when they do have a problem. But
Yeah.
of course, the goal of that counseling work is to help them build those patterns and habits. So the most important and the simplest to take home in a way for your listeners would be just a sense of responsibility to the person. I mean, this person was born to parents, raised with care and love, has their own hopes and dreams in life, and now they're kind of entrusted with you if you're in a relationship with them. So even when you're angry, just try to recall that, bring a little compassion and kind of work with, taking responsibility for this person. If there's resentments, talk it through, talk it out, break that ice. Don't let them sit there. Don't neglect. Don't dismiss. Don't deflect.
Okay, so people have a problem. They come to you. Your industry. I just want to set this right. Is there, because I know with certain psychologists and psychiatrists there is a stigma to it. When it comes to relationship counseling, are there stigmas in society when it comes to this?
Well, they're definitely changing over the time. I guess I can say this without offending anyone, but when I first started doing private practice in Singapore, my clients were almost entirely expatriate. Right? So I'd say about 80% were expatriate. But now I'd say it's more like 60-40.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
And most will say half of our team are Singaporeans.
Okay.
So of course we have a good range of clients across the board. So I think the stigma is disappearing over time. And of course Singapore is doing a lot to help that. So there's constantly articles in the Straits Times or different news sources that are saying, like, look, mental health is important. Let's all pay attention to it. Corporations are putting systems in place like EAP, employee assistance programs. For example, we're the EAP provider for Singapore Law Society.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
So people are taking responsibility to help, open that concept up so there's not such a stigma after all.
Okay, so you talked about responsibility as one of the pillars, right? What about communication, which is something that I think we should talk about? That's a big one, right? Between couples. But let's take that to Facebook. So join us there, please.
Morning.
So communication, it's key between anyone, not just between couples. But what does good communication really look like for partners in a relationship?
Well, what I'd like to do is reset that conversation about pillars. So communication will come best after two other things before it.
Okay.
So let's start with safety. So safety is the number one most important part of any relationship. Back to that boundaries conversation. And this isn't just about physical safety. This could be emotional safety, psychological safety. So there's a general belief that the person I'm with cares about me and wants to see me thrive. Okay, so once we have safety, then the person gets to make a choice to just decide, do they want to try to trust that person? Am I going to see how this plays out? So they'll take a chance and trust the person. If the person proves trustworthy, that's when communication becomes relevant. Because of course I'm going to listen to someone I trust. The words of someone I trust are important. That's going to help us connect. That's going to help us go deeper. So I think those two have to be there first. So whenever communication is getting stuck, you got to reconsider where are those two aspects of our relationship. How safe is this person with me? If they're not safe, of course they're going to shut down. They're going to block. They're going to guard. They're not going to open up. So you can see how important those two are before communication can flow.
Okay, so sorry, assuming you've got all those right in place, but then you hit a roadblock. You get into a fight, a disagreement. The communication starts to break down. You've seen these things happen. How can couples navigate? Besides going to a counselor, before going to a counselor, is there a way to circumvent this?
Well, if they're conscientious folks, then they probably have done a little bit of homework. They've read, they've looked for the popular books on the topic. Like, for example, one of the popular books we often mention to clients is This Is How Your Marriage Ends. That's the title of the book.
Great book.
Yeah, exactly. Great title, right? But it's actually meant to help couples navigate those silly little differences like, do I leave the cup on the counter or do I clean it? Like these kind of things. So, of course, they do their own due diligence beforehand. But, of course, when they get stuck and they're still not making any progress, or let's say one of the partners doesn't want to engage in that process, they don't want to do the readings and listening, then, of course, they can encourage that partner to come in for counseling. And so at counseling is where we'll offer them tools, tips, tricks, filters for the mind and ears that will help them. Yeah.
Okay, so he's not going to divulge any of these techniques, because you have to pay for Dr. Glenn.
I'm happy to share, especially the key ones. I'm happy to share with your audience.
I'm kidding.
It's interesting because we talk about this communication, but things change. They're continuously changing in a relationship. Relationships, I believe, are they evolve all the time. How do you make sure that what you started with doesn't fade through all that evolution?
Well, by starting with the premise that people are meant to evolve. So your partner should be an independent person from you. This isn't a blood relative. This is a person who chose to be with you, and they can choose to not be with you, right? So you have to respect that and work towards evolving and helping that person evolve. Now, if you're starting to evolve in different directions, of course, then you just pause, bring it in, say, hey, let's check in. Where are we heading with this? How important is that to you? Could we find some common shared vision of the future, or share something that's meaningful to both of us that we can rebuild on? So there's always ways to steer a relationship. Most people would say that marriages or relationships have many different chapters, many different lives. And
many different seasons.
It's meant to shed a skin and start a new one. So that's okay to do. Yeah.
Okay.
So would you suggest taking up a new hobby together? Finding time to spend with each other. One of those things that would help as you evolve throughout the relationship.
Definitely. Most people have heard of the love languages, right?
Yes.
So the love languages are ways that we can connect, right? Different languages we can speak. Same with intimacy. There's different facets of intimacy. So recreational intimacy, crisis intimacy. Some people get closer through crisis. Financial intimacy, physical, sexual, spiritual, religion. There's all kinds of different ways to reconnect.
Yeah.
Some people are foodies.
I sometimes look at it, because I've got grown-up kids who are married, and the young today are very much, I have the right to say what I want to say. And I will say what I want to say. It is my right. Is that a good thing in a relationship, or
to be as open as you think you should?
Forthright as that. I have a right to say this. I'm going to say it.
Well, put it to you this way, and this is a blanket statement that has held true through all my 20 years of counseling. The truth will set you free. Now, so you always want to work with the truth, even if it's painful and hard on the ears and dreadful and traumatizing. It's always better to know, for example, as a parent, I'd rather know what my son's struggling with than not know, so I can possibly help him, right? So if I hear it from a Gen Z, or I don't know what demographic you were referring to, but I'd welcome that. I'd prefer that, even if it's a complaint about me, insult, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, so you're saying that between couples there shouldn't be any censorship. You shouldn't hold back, even though once you say it,
it might hurt.
Yeah, it might hurt your partner.
You'd be surprised how resilient human beings are. I mean, of course, I'm working with some of the most traumatizing cases. Someone comes in at 20 years of betrayal, cheating the whole time. So how do you rebuild from that? But believe it or not, people do rebuild from that. They can actually reestablish trust, reestablish intimacy, have an entirely different future.
Smoke.
Yeah, it's. I feel very hopeful when couples come in. I feel like there really is possibility. If that's what you want, we can help you.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's why Dr. Glenn has been at this for over 20 years, because there is still light at the end of the tunnel, right? For these couples going through crisis in their relationship.
Especially if they have hope. It's only when they lose hope that we make a different turn, take a different direction. We can help people transition apart as well. The goal is not to keep everyone together. It's to keep people in a thriving, healthy environment.
Yes.
And if they're killing each other slowly, then of course we're going to talk about that and make a new plan, right?
We've heard it so many times. People are madly in love. They go through that honeymoon stage. They get into marriage, and things, as I said, things evolve, and some people end up. How do I put this? More friends than lovers, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Is that?
It is if they're okay.
Yeah.
So when we're losing ourselves, when we're denying ourselves something we need, like for example, often couples might just stop having sex altogether.
Yeah.
It could be 10 years they haven't had sex.
Yeah.
So if they're both okay with that and they're both somehow still thriving in the relationship, then that's what they chose, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe sex was something that didn't work for them and didn't connect them. But if one of them is suffering, then I don't recommend that exist. They should talk about it.
How do you overcome that, though? One person is no longer interested in it, but the other obviously is.
There's often reasons for that, and that's the whole point of talking. If you don't talk, you'll never know that there was a reason for that, and that reason can be fixed. It could be a childhood trauma that made them afraid of sex. It could be some perception they have about that act, or feeling like unappreciated during that, sex. So they just haven't said it. No one's listening, so they haven't talked about it. But once you put that on the table and you start to break it down with someone who can help,
Yeah, so you should break this down with a counselor. I mean, you don't do it just the two of you.
Well,
Yeah,
usually,
because people don't often talk about these things.
of course, that's the problem.
Yeah. It's like, it's all right, everything else is fine, in the relationship. Okay, we're going to go back on the air and talk to Dr. Glenn in just a bit. Karen White taking us to 9:27 here on the Morning Drive on a Friday, and very glad to have Dr. Glenn Graves with us. He's a psychologist and, of course, the founder of Counselling Perspective. We were talking about marriage. It's one of the hardest things that anyone can choose to dive into. And we've often heard of self-awareness and emotional maturity. Like, those are important things as well in sustaining a long-term relationship. Do you agree?
Yes, definitely.
But people often think that it's not important. Love is all it takes.
I think there's a lot more to it than that.
We've established,
been down that road for a long time.
We've established that fact, and also we were talking about what about expectations? You think that's something that if you're not on that same page, things often go bad from there.
Well, again, when you come into roadblocks like this, if you want to look at why this is happening, maybe the person is completely wired differently. They have, they're perfectionists and they need everything done a certain way, right? And their partner is the opposite, right? This is very common, by the way. So again, it's a conversation that has to start, and sometimes there's reasons for it. I have a lot of clients coming in now saying, I have ADHD, or my partner's ADHD and it's been a struggle for 10 years or whatever. So once we can work with what are the obstacles and issues, then we can break it down, try to find a new way to work together. So yes, people should be educating themselves. They should be seeking out answers to why they're doing what they're doing. In fact, when couples come in, I say, look, this work is not about fixing your partner. This is about hearing what you could be doing that could be changed, that could help the relationship. So while we're doing couples work, we're also doing a personal dive into who you are. So
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, couples go through rough patches, and we all joke about it. We had an argument and makeup sex was just great. You go through that rough patch. How important is that makeup sex at the end of it?
Well, makeup sex, like I said, with facets of intimacy. If sex isn't something they connect well on, then that's not going to necessarily be a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's just let's have sex or makeup sex so that we can say we worked on a relationship, that could be a disaster for one and great for another, right?
Okay.
So it's more important that they know what are their facets of intimacy, what really connects them, whether it's, again, spiritual, emotional, physical, recreational.
Right.
And again, it's important because a lot of counselors will think that, okay, sex is the heart of it all. They just keep having sex, they'll be fine. So they'll encourage people to have sex. They'll encourage couples to go try harder, spend more time with that. But if that's something that's been a negative experience for one, it could actually create a bigger problem for the relationship. So it's very important we know why there's been a distance or an aversion to the sexual connection.
Okay.
Yeah. You also do something called neurofeedback.
Yeah, what's this?
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, so our practice is unique in that we take this complementary approach. So we're very open to all the different ways of healing.
Okay.
It's not just traditional psychotherapy. We have lots of different methods and approaches, including sound healing.
Yes.
We have
I've heard about that.
Reiki energy healing, body talk. We have this neurofeedback. We have Ayurvedic. So we're really open. We have 3 different offices doing different things in all of them.
But neurofeedback.
So neurofeedback is technology that's used to assess the brain. So you imagine when someone wants to know if they have ADHD or if they have depression or anxiety, there's the traditional psychometric testing way where there's conversations and exams and different things that'll take let's say several hours and several $1,000s, right? But neurofeedback technology has been around for many years. I'd say at least 50 years in different parts of the world, more popularly. But in Singapore, I brought it into Singapore about 6 years ago, and there's several other companies doing neurofeedback here. So this device we put on the head, it's 19 channels. It can measure all the different regions of the brain and give us a report that shows the frequencies of the brain waves.
Right.
These are measured in hertz.
Yeah.
So this could tell us if a person is likely to have ADHD, dyslexia, autism, brain trauma, insomnia, depression, anxiety. So it's really...
So because sometimes you talk to people, and I was just talking to someone the other day, and he goes, there's something wrong. I don't know what it is.
But I can feel that there's something wrong.
But I can feel
So
there's something. Would I
help.
use neurofeedback then?
For sure. In fact, the actual assessment takes about 18 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like we do 7 minutes eyes open, 7 minutes eyes closed. If the person's wiggling a lot, then we got to go a little longer. But the whole thing is in less than 20 minutes and half the price of psychometric testing.
Right. I suggest all the men put on this device, okay?
Okay. I'll give a discount for all the men.
Yeah, please. Man, my wife would be so happy if I could figure this out.
Yeah.
No, someone's come across on our Facebook and asked for advice in a marriage where depression is present. What does one do then?
Well, if the partner knows they have depression and they're willing to work on it, then you're halfway there. They got to be talking to someone. They got to be getting support and get some help, whether that's medication or whether it's working through some trauma.
Right.
A lot of people I'm seeing are facing career hits, like they got let go, laid off, they got put down by a boss, and they're just kind of traumatized. So now they're kind of going inward and kind of showing signs of depression. So it may not be the chemical depression where they need medication. They might just need a reboot, some trauma work or whatever.
Yeah.
But if your partner has depression and they're not willing to work on it, that's when you got to create a safe space for them to go look deeper. So often I have I have to be honest, no offense to the men out there, but it's usually the women who are coming in, calling, saying, we need issues, we need help for our
With our
issues.
partners, yeah.
So they're trying to get the husband in, but he's not willing to, right? So they'll say, what can I do to get him in? And I'll say, well, what you got to do is just remind him that, first of all, it's non-judgmental. We don't judge people for no matter what they did. It's confidential, 100% confidential. And to be honest, when the men come in, they usually love it. They actually have more fun than the women sometimes. They actually really like talking through their problems. So
Yeah.
they just got to
Okay.
try it, basically.
You
Yeah.
know, this has been so interesting. If someone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Well, we have our website, counsellingperspective.com. That's counseling with one L.
Okay.
Annoying a lot of people from the traditional.
Okay, counselingperspective.com.
Yes, and then the neurofeedback, that's mindfulpathway.com. Mindfulpathway.com.
Okay.
Okay.
Or you could just Google Dr. Glenn Graves. Thank you very much for your time
Thanks, mate.
today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you both.
The Morning Drive, 6 till